Hello, K-Squid listeners. That was Giuseppe Del Bianco playing Music for a Drinking Straw on a plastic straw, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. But we're going to expand more widely and talk about other things as well. This is Sustainability Now. It's every other Sunday again, and I'm Ronnie Lipschutz. Sustainability Now is a bi-weekly K-Squid radio show focused on environment, sustainability, and social justice in the Monterey Bay region, California, and the world. Well, plastic is ubiquitous. It rains down on us. It fouls lands, streams, and oceans. It even turns up in our bodies. And the big oil companies are looking to plastic to keep up profits when fossil fuels are finally banned. So what are we to do? My guest today is Jackie Nuñez, founder of The Last Plastic Straw in Santa Cruz and advocacy manager of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. The Last Plastic Straw is a project of the Plastic Pollution Coalition, a global alliance of more than 1,200 organizations, businesses, and thought leaders in 75 countries that seeks to shift the way individuals and businesses think about plastic pollution and about our society's disposable culture on a larger scale. Jackie, welcome to Sustainability Now.
Hi, thank you for having me. That was really interesting. I've never heard that straw pollute before.
Well, somebody
People
pointed out to me
all kinds of crazy things.
Somebody pointed out to me
Never
that
heard
penny whistles do the same thing.
Yeah, correct.
So it's going to be difficult to sustain an hour-long conversation solely about plastic straws. So I'm hoping we can explore related topics, and especially the disposable culture and what we might do to change it. So why don't we start with some personal history? What is your background in education, and how did you get into this business?
Yeah, well, I started off, just traveling a lot. My family, I grew up in a lot of different places. By the time I was in high school, we've lived in 6 different places throughout the United States. I'm first generation born Cuban American, and I come from a family of 5, and so I kind of had the travel bug in me. I've lived a lot of places. I've had a lot of different jobs in my adulthood and continue to travel. But I landed in Santa Cruz about 21 years ago now, and my education was I got a BS in health in Worcester State College in Massachusetts, where I spent high school and college, and then I started traveling and working different odd jobs, and one of those jobs was being a lifeguard. One of the other jobs was I worked with Club Med and traveled different places and worked doing sports with kids outdoors. So I've always been outdoors and doing different jobs. When I landed in Santa Cruz, I became a kayak guide, kept on the water, and then I got an AS degree from Cabrillo College in horticulture. And so I've been doing landscaping and gardening throughout Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz County.
So you saw
kind of my background.
You saw a lot of straws when in all of those sort of water and marine related
not
activities. No,
straws. I saw plastic everywhere, and one of the things when I became a kayak guide, I worked for Kim Powell Blue Water Ventures here in Santa Cruz, and we do a lot of primarily out of the Elkhorn Slough, but also in the Bay. And sometimes I get lucky enough to do an international trip with her and do a lot of traveling. Part of my where I lived is I spent junior high in Puerto Rico. We spent 3 years there. I've got extended family there, so I go back every year. So I've had that snapshot of the beaches and how much. And I always say, if you travel anywhere in the last 10 or 15 years, you see how exponential the amount of plastic pollution you're seeing everywhere, right? So I just got to a point where I was finally settled in one place. I was seeing it everywhere. I volunteered for Save Our Shores, local organization here in Santa Cruz, and became a sanctuary steward and learned all about, just more in depth about plastic pollution. And with that, we had a lot of great speakers come, scientists come through. This was about 11 years ago when I was really kind of deep diving into it. And when you do the sanctuary steward program with Save Our Shores, at the time, you owed them 50 hours of volunteer time for beach cleanups and dock walker events. So I got to the point back then, there was a lot of data coming out about a lot of the plastic they were finding in the ocean and in the gyres. And the scientists would come and they have all the data. They were getting it out there, but they were really beside themselves, like, we're getting this data out, but no one's really changing their behavior. And for me, I travel a lot. I waitress, I bartend. I know how much straws go out there. It wasn't like I had this, grand plan. It was just, I was just as overwhelmed as everyone else. And I knew that it had to, beach cleanups are great, but I wanted to nip it at the bud and get it from the start and kind of raise that awareness. And it was really my last plastic straw moment was when after I'd done a trip in Belize, we were out in about 45 kilometers off the coast of Belize in this, it was actually a World Heritage Site, Glover's Atoll, a beautiful place. They don't even fish there. The island we were on had no electricity. We were in these huts that literally on the water, and a storm came blowing through that we thought was going to blow the hut in the water. And the next day, we were out there, these beautiful untouched reefs where literally a river of trash came by us, and most of it was plastic. And what had happened the night before from the mainland, the storm came through and just flushed it all into the ocean.
Yeah.
So I got back to Santa Cruz. I was super dejected. I'd already been volunteering and doing beach cleanups, but, to me, it's great for awareness. It's great to doing it, but it's like it's as if there's the analogy we use is if there's a bathtub overflowing, the first thing you do is you don't mop the floor. You go and turn off that tap, and I wanted to turn off that tap. So, long story short, I ended up at a beachside bar waiting for some friends from out of town, and I ordered a glass of water. And I was already aware. I was seeing plastic straws and all these other things, and I was refusing it when I go out, just saying no straw. But I didn't think that it would come in my water. And that was it. When that drink came, that water came with the straw in it, that was my last. And I'm looking at the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary, and that was my last plastic straw moment. And I looked down, and there was that, at the time there was a drought going on, and we had the Water is Precious campaign in California where they only serve water upon request.
Right.
And so I knew, I'm like, oh, that's it. And that's the least the restaurant could do. If the least they did is just wrote straws upon request, that'd be nothing off their back. That's one less item they'd have to buy. We're not asking to do anything different but I knew that most people did not need straws. And yet we were being served it, whether we asked for it or not. Most of us didn't have it at home. It was literally under our noses, and no one was taking stock. And I saw how powerful it was when I would bring it up with my friends. I mean, even my friends that I was doing beach cleanups with, we'd go out for a burrito or something to drink, and we'd get something to drink, and I was already saying no to straws, and they would get the straw. I'm like, didn't you just see what we just cleaned up? And there was a disconnect. And they were like, oh, my God, I never thought about that. And so one of the lines I tell people was like, well, think about it. Your straw is going to last moments in your drink, but it's going to outlive you in generations to come in our environment. Is that the legacy you want to leave? So I knew it was a powerful thing, and I could see that light bulb go off and that awareness, and it didn't stop there. I mean, my whole premise was that no one sets out to pollute the planet. We're just not aware. And I knew everyone was just as overwhelmed as I was. So this was a simple, tangible thing where you can start the conversation, but it was always about single-use plastic. It really never was about the straw. Mm-hmm. I called it the gateway issue. It led to conversations of people like, oh, my God, I never thought about this. What else am I doing? My single-use water bottle, what else can I change? And that's how it started.
I mean, I like that notion of the gateway plastic, which shows up in one of the websites, right? I mean, it's an interesting kind of way to think about it. As you're talking about this and about the frustrated scientists, who are producing reams and reams of knowledge and information, and it doesn't affect people's behaviors. I mean, that's always a sort of the question that comes up, right? Which is, and your friends, of course, and I mean, I'm not trying to, diss this or anything. Your friends are good citizens, right? So they will be very careful to dispose of their straws properly, right? And the disconnect
not
is
necessarily.
Well, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? But I mean, the disconnect, right, is that, well, we put things in a recycling bin, and we assume that they're handled properly thereafter. And then we find out, in fact, no, stuff is going to the landfill. It's not being recycled, right? And so we have a certain amount of faith and trust in this waste, disposal chain, which isn't necessarily justified. So, but it's an interesting sort of dilemma. How do you get people to change? And I actually want to come back to that a little bit later. And I've asked other people that I've interviewed about this question. So
Yeah.
you started this out with Save Our Shores, right? And then you joined the Plastic Pollution Coalition. So tell us a little bit about that. What it does.
So I started off with Save Our Shores. This became my 50-hour project, right? I wasn't funded. They just let me, do this as a volunteer project. They supported me. The city of Santa Cruz was amazing. They really helped coach me and let me know that they purchased a bunch of paper straws for me to hand out and not go single-handedly, empty-handed, to restaurants. But one of the great things about the plastic straw, and you talking about my friends and recycling, I mean, it is the poster child of useless single-use plastic, and so it never was recyclable. So it is not even in that conversation about recycling. It doesn't even get through the sorters. There's no recycle symbol on it. You don't know what type of plastic it's made out of. I mean, it's just one of these things that's really a non-essential item for most people. So it was a great thing, and come to find out that this was, unbeknownst to me, that there's actually a whole field of study how little habits lead to big habits.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That kind of broadens it out, and that was one of the things that we really kind of dove into. When you really look at plastic was never designed to be recycled in the first place. So think about that. I mean, it never was. It was because there's so many different variations of it. It's really hard to sort it out and get the right resin codes. People are confused by it. Every community has will accept different ones. The markets change, but come to find out, it was the big con from the plastics industry in the 70s. It started out with the crying Indian. You might be old enough to remember that moving video of the crying Indian, where the Indian goes through the landscape and then comes to the edge of town, and then someone throws trash out of the window, and I forget what the tagline was. But
well, in the intro, I can tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is in a second. But in the interests of historical veracity, I think it was. I think it was about paper stuff being thrown out of the window, because I'm not sure it was about plastic.
Well,
but the tagline was people cause pollution, people can stop it. And
exactly.
But
that was it was the rise of the ecology movement at that time. And plastics, they were doubling down on single-use plastics at that time, actually. So so they knew, they could see the writing on the wall that this is what was staying durable, and in our it wasn't like, at least paper would eventually dissolve or go away, but they knew that this was sticking around, and people were starting to raise alarms about it because they were doubling down on packaging and this throwaway type culture, and really getting us to use something once and then throw it out, and so they started Keep America Beautiful, and they really kind of control the narrative that, don't litter and recycle. But really, it's always kind of messed up the whole recycling system to begin with. I mean, the few things that you could, the aluminum, the glass, the paper, now you throw in plastic, and and they're trying to create markets, and it's just a mess.
You're listening to KSQD 90.7 FM and ksqd.org, streaming on the internet. You're listening to Sustainability Now, and this is Ronnie Lipschutz. My guest today is Jackie Nuñez, founder of The Last Plastic Straw and advocacy manager of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. We were just talking about the sort of origins of the ecology movement and the awareness that plastic was going to be a long-term problem then. And one of the things that puzzles me, Jackie, is it seemed to have gone away, or as an issue, it seemed to have declined, because I don't remember being alive and conscious back in the 1970s, I think, hearing very much about this. It was sort of like, things have been taken care of. So what happened?
Oh, they did a good job of having that whole away notion that if you, like you were saying earlier, if you were a good citizen and you didn't litter and you put it in the bin, that it was actually going to go away and get recycled. Well, it went out of our hands and out of our backyards, and we didn't see it as much. But come to find out that we were shipping it to other countries to dispose of and to pick through and to try to make some sort of market to our trash. It got exposed, actually, like the story of the year in 2018 was just highlighting the fact that China refused taking our plastic anymore.
Right.
And that what we determined to be recyclable was actually a really loose term. It was included incineration, and it included shipping to other third world countries, and mostly in the global south, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines. And the U.S. is actually one of the largest exporters of plastic waste. And unfortunately, California is number one in the United States. I think maybe our size and demographics as well. But that's also why I realized in my travels and everything that the problem stems from home. I mean, you got to clean up your own house before you can clean up anyone else's, and really kind of start from the source. So that was kind of my impetus. That really, I joke around and I call myself, I went from a slacktivist to an activist, and which is a real thing. And if any of you guys can identify with it, please still do it. It's basically, if you're the sharing of online petitions or stories or things to like kind of educate your friends or whatever, that still do that. But I just got to a point where I just had to do more, and I tell kids all the time, with the knowledge comes the duty to act. And I just felt that I was onto something, and maybe I could stick my neck out there and try this project.
Yeah, it's when I was preparing for the interview, I started to look into the history of straws, because I thought, well, they must have been invented sometimes, and then I discovered the film Straws, in which you appear briefly, and I thought I might play the trailer, because it's sort of amusing and interesting as well. So here's the trailer from the film Straws by Rachel Booker.
So why do you think someone invented straws? What do you think this straw is trying to solve? What problem?
I guess just the problem of having to lift the cup to your face. I don't really know.
The history of straws. Officially, straws debuted in ancient Mesopotamia, where Sumerians guzzled beer through straws of gold. In the 1950s, the rise of the automobile brought with it fast food and the desire for disposable dinnerware. Straws were officially a hit. Cheaper and easier to mass produce, plastic straws were soon everywhere. Crazy straws, magic straws, Slurpee straws, and giant straws to go with America's jumbo thirst.
I was at a beachside bar, and I ordered a glass of water. And as I was sitting there looking out at the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary, the glass of water came with a plastic straw in it, which I did not ask for. And that was kind of that was it. That was my last straw, my last plastic straw. It really have nothing against straws. It's just the material it's made out of. Like, to me, it's a design flaw.
Plastic's a miracle product. I'm not saying all plastic is bad, but with any resource, we have to use it wisely.
It's a new substance. It's not from the earth in the way other things are from the earth. This plastic is functioning as a kind of imposter for food for lots of creatures.
He bit on it and he said it's plastic. Is it a straw? Don't tell me it's a freaking straw.
And I was just thinking, man, yeah, I can show the world of what just one straw does to wildlife.
I think all of us can start to put pressure on this issue. There is plastic where it doesn't belong. There's too much of it.
So that's why I created the No Straw Challenge, so people would go out and ask restaurants to stop serving straws. Like, I can't do this all by myself. I need help.
Billions of them are buried in landfills and litter our planet every year, winding up in oceans. No longer a harmless, small item, straws are a giant menace.
That was the trailer for Straws. Maybe a little bit overdone there, especially the last one. I mean, giant menace, really representative of a whole category of stuff, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Actually, you never told us about. Don't think you ever told us about the Plastic Pollution Coalition, which is much broader than just straws. So maybe you can tell us something about that.
that's a good segue, actually, the movie, because what had happened was, I'd been plugging away locally in Santa Cruz and also internationally, just putting it out there with a Facebook page and then a web page in 2014, and I knew that there were other people that were probably catching on to this and doing it. So I was reaching out to other people doing this in their towns and sharing information. A lot of kids got involved. But it wasn't really, so I was making momentum. It was kind of this groundswell of people just becoming aware and taking action in their towns. But it really wasn't until the turtle video went viral. So, you can hear it, but you couldn't see the video. But there was a viral turtle video that happened in, I think it was August of 2015. Christine Finnegar took a marine biologist in Costa Rica. They had found a male turtle with a blocked nasal passage, and when they went to pull out what was in it, it turned out to be a plastic straw. And that video just went viral, and that blew up my inbox. Everyone sent me that video. Who's the geek that had a whole website on plastic straws? It was me. So people contacted me. I had reporters. I had other organizations, by the way, that I've been reaching out to for years, saying, "Hey, I think straw is going to be the tipping point issue. I think straws are going to be the behavior change tool we're looking for." And they're like, yeah, low-hanging fruit. They really, and rightfully so, they were looking at bags, they were looking at polystyrene, they were looking, a lot of bigger items, or, even drift nets, all kinds of things of plastic problems. But we weren't getting the momentum or the movement we were looking for until this happened. And so everyone came calling me, and one of the organizations was Plastic Pollution Coalition. I already became a member of Plastic Pollution Coalition as an organization in 2014. When this all went viral, they reached out and let's work together. Let's work on a plastic straw campaign. So we created a turtle, Skip the Straw, Save the Sea Turtle sticker. I started talking to schools. They really supported me. That actually gave me access to all the other organizations, since they were just a big umbrella with a lot of people working on this issue. And then shortly thereafter, I became a full-time project. And more importantly, I became funded, because all this was done on my time and my dime. And it got really stressful when it really went viral. Careful what you ask for. I knew it would be a movement. And I'm not just saying that like the tout on the horn. I could see the momentum. I knew that people would take it on as their own. I knew kids would embrace it. And you can't control a movement. I didn't know when it would tip and how it would go. But I could see it happening kind of in real time. But it was really, at the beginning, it was really hard, because at the time I was holding down 3 jobs. I worked also the front desk at the Walton Spa. I was landscaping, and I was kayak guiding just to make rent. And at that time, when everything started moving, it was hard for me to say no to anything, but I wasn't getting paid. So, and not that I was doing this for the money. That was the thing. This was always open sourced. I knew it would go. So anyway, Plastic Pollution Coalition, it became a project of theirs. I'm still working for them now. It is proven to be a truly a gateway issue. And it was in line with their mission statement too, because my mission statement, I don't even mention the word straws, by the way, in my mission statement. It's about raising the awareness about absurdity of single-use plastic, the effects on our health, our environment, and our oceans, and to eliminate from the source single-use plastic pollution. It's basically my tagline. So it was a perfect match, and it really, what it did is gave me access. But now straws has become kind of like not only the gateway, but also impetus for a lot of policy. Like the straw bans were going crazy in 2018. But with that, which was really interesting, was they might have started off talking about a straw ban, but as people started, really going through the legislative process, like, well, wait a minute, if we're going to ban plastic straws, we should be looking at utensils, we should be looking at bottles, we should be looking at, and it's like, true. So that was the beauty of it. Like, even the bad press, like you make a comment like, well, there's such bigger things, and it's only 0.2% in the ocean is straws, and I always say, yeah, you're right. Or what about water bottles? What about whatever? Like, yeah, let's talk about it. What about those? Those are all valid. Like, that's the point, and so that was the great thing about it. Even the bad press was good press. It had everyone talking about single-use plastic, and that was, actually the point. So it's been a crazy wild ride, and now I'm the policy advocacy director. So not director, but manager for Plastic Pollution Coalition. I'm in a lot of policy meetings now. Careful what I ask for. Helping to write policy and work with other groups about passing laws. We actually have, for the first time ever, we have a statewide ballot that's going to be coming up in, I think, 2022, a plastic ballot that we're urging people to vote in favor for, which would actually take multiple steps to really get a handle on our single-use plastic packaging and containers, utensils. Have to be either reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and really truly meet that definition. Or you can't serve it.
Yeah, that's actually I actually had that in mind, that there is this going to be this referendum, but there were bills introduced in the California legislature that basically died. And what was it? Who was against them? I mean, what was why did they fail, or why were they left to die?
It's a huge lobby. It's basically the plastics lobby. The ACC is all the biggies. It's the petrochemical and oil and gas industry, right? If you think about it, the reason why we're seeing so much plastic everywhere, I mean, half of all the plastic that's ever been made has been made in the last 15 years, which is insane. And you think, but it makes sense. Like when you go to the store and you see an avocado wrapped in plastic, you're like, why? Like, what is going on here? And what is going on is we have a glut of fracking fuel at the moment, and they're actually doubling the time when we should be making less. They're doubling down to make even more of this low-grade, crappy plastic to push into our communities. And so this is where we're at, and they're a huge lobby, and we have a huge lobby here, DART containers, and it gets. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of players involved too. Sometimes the restaurant associations against it if it's too restrictive as far as some of the measures in some of these bills.
Right.
But we did have a sweep of plastics bills, combination of COVID and everything else. It just kind of had it all die just leading up to it. We even had honestly legislators that just didn't even show up to vote. And then you go and you follow the money and you see who's, donating to them. I mean, it doesn't matter, if they were Republican or Democrats. They were just, bought to be silenced. And that's the frustrating part, about a lot of this in policy. And that's why I think it's really important that I tell kids this all the time, it's really important that you show up and speak up and get involved, especially on the local level, because when you go local, it goes state, and then it goes global. And so with a lot of our policies that have passed on the local level, it gives a lot of pressure to do it on the state level. And you get that tipping point, and then they can't, look the other way anymore. But it's a frustrating process, knowing the politics about it.
You're listening to Sustainability Now. I'm Ronnie Lipschutz, and my guest today is Jackie Nuñez. She is founder of The Last Plastic Straw and advocacy manager of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. We've just been talking about the plastic ban bills that were shot down in the California legislature. There's now going to be a referendum. Have the signatures been collected, or is it just that the referendum has been approved for petitioning, Jackie?
They actually, believe it or not, with COVID, they made it really difficult, and we were able to get the signatures. So it is down the ballot for 2022.
Wow.
And they were able, but they delayed it. They made it really hard, and then so we couldn't get it. In the last, we were trying to get it in the last ballot. But 2022, we got it. So
Maybe it should be on there with Gavin Newsom, huh? At the recall. So, look. You've been talking about essentially social movements, right? And this as a social movement. Have you ever given any thought to how social movements get started? This is a perennial interest of mine. I mean, this is a sort of an interesting case study again, because it's been out there all along, right? And do you what have you thought about that at all? Well, let me put it a different way. If you were going to try and launch a movement again, how would you go about doing it?
Probably a similar way. I mean, I don't know. It's not quite a formula. What I was starting to say is that, one of the things that someone told me early on is like, you environmentalists, like, you're like killing everyone with data and facts and science, which, is good. But, people are visual, and we need to have those visuals and everything. And the case in point was that turtle. I mean, that really is what knocked it out of the park. No matter how much I talked about it and people were going, having that awareness, and we did have a slow burn. It was moving. That is what just kind of tipped it. And the plastics industry knew, and I knew the plastics industry really didn't have anything on the plastic straws, right? There was really no argument that they could have against it. I knew the only indication that I knew that the only demographic that really would depend on straws was the disabled community.
Right.
So I knew that, and that was fine. Like, I've always been against straw bans per se. I was always about the reducing of single-use plastics. So always provide them for the people who need them. And my thing is, it may not necessarily need to be plastic, right? It could be whatever other materials that were coming out. But it wasn't for me to say. And the great thing about that, too, again, even the bad press was good press. It gave the disabled community an opportunity to speak about their needs beyond just ADA, the ramps and stuff. Because I really looked into the ADA requirements when I decided to pursue plastic straws. And I knew I wanted to keep it positive. I think that's another key thing. I didn't want to alienate anyone who liked, needed, wanted a plastic straw. That wasn't the point. And I knew that kids would take it on, so I didn't want to hear any kid telling another kid that they suck, or whatever for using a straw. That was not the point. It was about raising awareness about single-use plastic. And so that was kind of the key things that I really kind of looked at and knew that, that would be the indicators that we were going somewhere with it. Honestly, in the time when I started, it was me and a 9-year-old Milo Crest in Vermont. I'm a flat activist or an activist. I was looking out there for whatever, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. Obviously, someone else has thought about this if I'm thinking about it, right?
Right.
And me and Milo. And so I, looked him up. We shared information. He came up with this 500 million straws a day statistic, which I still stand by. A lot of people criticized it, but I don't care if it's not scientific or not. He basically, a 9-year-old, maybe he was 12 at the time when he finally got the number, but he had just did a phone survey and called a combination of the Restaurant Association, and he called straw manufacturers, and the ballpark was 300 million straws to 800 million, right?
Right.
So he just took the average, which was 500 million. And, I used to bartend, whatever. I believe it. People get all mad. They go, wait a minute, well, there's only 300 and whatever million people in the United States, and how can you say that that's what the average, use is a day in the U.S.? But it's, I've talked to straw manufacturers, actually alternative straw manufacturers, that say actually they think the number is closer to 1 million. But no one's going to tell you that, right? Then even like, say, Starbucks, when they put in, and I know this because they put in orders for straws, and they will downplay how many straws they actually serve, but the orders tell the true thing, and it's a lot more. It's like 3 times the amount that they say that they're serving.
Mm-hmm.
So, regardless, I still stick by it, but that was a lot of controversy, too. People were going, so I knew that they would pick holes in that, and I still stand by it, and Milo, and they'll try to discredit it and everything, but I know that that's a low number because that was from 2012, and at the time it was just doubling down.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's another example of if you offer a statistic, right, people are going to start disputing it, whether, however you've derived it. It's just sort of part of the landscape, which
is fine. Yeah.
Well, but in one sense, right, if you get enough people disputing it, right, you get publicity on the other
true.
On the other hand, people are arguing over a number, and all the other stuff sort of gets thrown to the side.
Exactly.
And and I think, well, it's my belief that that this goes back to the frustration of the scientists, producing all kinds of quantitative data, which most people can't read, and it really does have to be in people's sort of daily experience, I guess. And yeah, I mean, straws are ubiquitous. Although I did want to say that somebody must be using all of my straws, because I use maybe one a month, and so somebody somewhere is using up all of my straws. Well, so you start with this sort of focus on a single item, right? And the Plastics Pollution Coalition website offers a list of 30 alternatives to plastic straws to skip single-use plastic. But, one of your points is that straws are, for the most part, not necessary, right? They're sort of almost an accoutrement to a drink. You can certainly drink something without having a straw. And so it's, in many ways, it's almost a luxury item. And so I was wondering, why, instead of offering alternatives, right, why not then campaign? And I mean, this extends more broadly to other kinds of single-use plastics. Campaign more broadly on the sort of necessity or lack of necessity for these kinds of things. I know that the county was a year or two ago before COVID was looking at trying to encourage reusable cups, right? To start I can't remember exactly what the nature of that was, and everybody carries around a water bottle these days, right? Which wasn't the case 40 years ago. And so why can't we find a way to get people to, carry coffee cups around, carry reusable coffee cups around? And there's something about changing behavior. It doesn't, of course, change the whole structure of the industry. But it is a behavioral change. And so
that is what we are moving towards, just like what you're saying with the county. Unfortunately, COVID hit, right? And industry just doubled down on that and just said, got everybody scared about, it's driving me crazy, even in Santa Cruz, that they still won't take my cup, and I will try in my favorite coffee shop.
Really?
And they still, I call it, COVID, and now I'm calling it COVID improv theater, because I get all kinds of answers. They're improvisational theater in front of me, like trying to make up excuses as to why. When I tell them, like, it's not spread that way. We don't have, it hasn't been told by our health department that we have to go this way, and you can go back to accepting my mug. We actually have a state law that was passed to accept reusables, and restaurants always have the right to refuse, right? If I come with my nasty mug, like, no, I'm not going to serve you. But if I'm coming with a clean mug, I mean, it's going to save you money, and it's driving me crazy. And I know there's a combination of things happening here, especially with COVID. Is a lot of restaurants are struggling. They don't have the staff to wash the dishes or whatever. But if I bring my own mug, you're not washing my dish, and so that's what gets me. It's just so upset. It's like, this is a non-argument right now, and I'm walking out. Like, you're not going to get my business. And so save a lot of money. But, I think things are changing. They're opening up, and I think they'll do that. But one of the provisions that we're looking at is just kind of a reusable model where we require that dine-in, you have basically reusables. Like, you're not going to be served single-use plastic. And some of the language that we're talking about is non-essential plastic. And so some of these non-essentials, like you were saying with plastic straws, it really makes a conversation about wants versus needs. It really comes down to that. An interesting case was I had a group of waitresses that were all moms and height of this, and they didn't even bother, like, asking the management whether or not, not serve straws on request. They just started not doing it, right? But they found when it got busy that it was time, conserve time to ask, like, whether anyone wanted a straw. Well, and they told me, they said it really matters how we ask. If you say, would anyone like a straw or want a straw? I mean, we are trained to not refuse the gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you upsell in the business.
Yeah,
right? You suggest something that you normally don't have at home. And like, ooh, okay, it's hard for us to say no to that. But if they just, nicely in the same way says, does anyone need a straw? And then it puts the honest back to the customer, and they think about it. Actually, I don't.
That's
and
interesting.
they said it was night and day.
Uh-huh.
They were giving out like 90% less. The people who need it are going to ask for it, and that's really the premise of it. And so it's really kind of getting people to think about this, what's really wanted, what's really needed. The one thing that silver lining I would say with COVID would be really kind of showing the systems that aren't serving us and aren't working. And even these restaurants are really urging. I mean, they spent so much money on all this, plastic crap to put everything to go. But now as things opening, we're really urging them to open with reuse and think about these reuse systems, even if it's just, accepting a mug and allowing that, and or looking at these systems where you can do reusable containers for to-go.
Right, right,
So,
right.
yeah.
I need to take another break.
Okay.
No, go ahead, finish, and then I'll take the break.
Well, I mean, I used to say now calling the straw actually it's the key to the door. The door's wide open. Everyone's in the room talking about plastic, and I feel like my work is just starting now. It's like really to get people to where we need to go to really get out of this bad habit of all the single-use stuff. So that's where we're at.
Well, you're listening to Sustainability Now. This is Ronnie Lipschutz. My guest today is Jackie Nuñez, founder of The Last Plastic Straw and advocacy manager of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. We've been talking about our society's, I suppose, disposable culture. And I was wondering, Jackie, what can we do? What do you think we can do to change it? I mean, of course, there's the whole idea of putting in place reusable items, right? Doing away with single-use items, but in a sense that addresses one thing, and the disposable culture is obviously a much broader sort of phenomenon. So you have any ideas about changing how to change that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always said that a lot of the answers to our questions, whether it be plastics or climate or, a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now, is going to be regional. Right?
Okay.
I mean, go back to regional systems. And it's a system shift that we're really kind of looking at. And again, you were talking about bottle bills, or like a take-back program for bottles like we used to have, refill systems. If you think about it, even food, right? There's a whole local. We are so fortunate in Santa Cruz, for many of us, that we've got farmers markets almost, every day of the week in Santa Cruz County, whether it be Scotts Valley, Santa Cruz, Watsonville. We've got them going on. We're in the breadbasket here, and so buying local, buying fresh food, the nutritional value goes up. You don't need as much packaging. The money stays local. Right, it's a win-win. Except the only one that's not winning are the polluters, and so this is what we really want to shift. And there are ways that we can do it where we can get our food sovereignty back, but also just kind of break away from all this. And you think about a lot of this industrialized food. If you see me right now, I'm doing air quotes about food because this industrialized food system, a lot of this isn't even good food. It's a lot of the junk food, and it has no nutritional value, and they're shipping it from all over. It's really shifting away from that. But really, I mean, businesses won't self-regulate. And I think there is a room for regulation, and that's why I'm involved in policy. And we do have a great, I think, a baseline measure on the national level that would really help us even locally on the state level. Is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act that actually deals with the plastic problem, the crisis, I'd like to say, from wellhead to waste. And, from the extraction, I mean, if you think about plastic, it's a gross polluter at every stage of its existence and contributing to climate change. And we have a lot of measures that we're looking at. We talk about disposable plastics. That also creates a disposable culture in people. There's people that are really being poisoned by the manufacture of this in their communities, from the incineration of plastic, from just the whole build out with the fracking and they call them the cracking plants, where they crack the ethanol to crack the fracking fuel to make ethanol, to make more plastic. It is just, polluting in every stage. And one of the things I would love to see is hazardous waste designation for plastics. And we talk about recycling, we talk about compost, we talk about, biodegradable. Plastic does not fit any of those definitions. What it does fit to a T in our environment is hazardous waste. I mean, it's poisoning. We're finding it in women's placentas. We're finding it at the highest peaks, in the lowest depths. We found there was a study just came out in the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. We're finding plastic down there. I mean, it's ubiquitous. It is not going away. It's in our water. It's in our beer. It's everywhere, and we're breathing it, right? So, it's really, if we can get that, it really should be polluter pays, and there should be some this responsibility for that. I mean, right now it's just passed on. They're literally, if you think about it, plastic is made out of the toxic waste byproduct of the petrochemical and gas industry. That's the feedstock for plastic, and then we're wrapping our food in that, and they're shipping it to our communities, and then we're told, and we have to try to manage that, and they're telling us to waving our finger like don't litter and recycle. Well, that's not going to cut it. I mean, they've had that narrative, and we're flipping that narrative. I mean, you talk about the scientists and all the studies and the just the data that's coming out. But what's happening is industry's got a great way of packaging and all these false solutions. So right now what's happening with policy is now they're shifting, and they're talking about advanced recycling, waste to energy, chemical recycling, all these like pie-in-the-sky technological quote-unquote fixes, but basically it's just another form of incineration. And so, we are not winning that messaging war with the public. Although we have science, we've got data, we've got truth on our side. We need to be more provocative in our messaging. And this is what I try to really strive to do. I mean, with Plastic Pollution Coalition, one of the things that we do is we have these pillars. We educate, communicate, and connect. And so we continue to do that. And the premise of Plastic Pollution Coalition actually started 11 years ago, too, when I first started, was because there was a conference that came out about the plastic problem and in the ocean, because all this data was coming out, and a lot of industry was involved in this conference, and they invited all these NGOs, these little NGOs that are working on the problem, and wine and dine them and help fund this conference. But basically what they did is they bought themselves a seat at the table. So by the end of this conference, with all of the scientists giving the data and talking about the problem, they would not sign on calling it what it was, plastic pollution. They were calling it still marine debris, which I know is a scientific term, but also marine debris could be a coconut. I mean, come on, it's not plastic pollution. So that was actually the impetus of Plastic Pollution Coalition, and the forming of it was to call it what it is, plastic pollution. And so it was like 25 organizations. It was a surf rider. It was 5 jars. It was a lot of these different organizations come together, and also politicians. I mean, there was like just notable members and musicians and artists just all wanting to work towards this messaging. So like I said, I feel like, our work is just really starting to begin. Now we've gotten the awareness, been doing a great job getting the awareness out there, but really it's just moving it now to the action items, to really kind of communicating what is really going on. I mean, what I would like to say when they say waste to energy, it's just a transfer of pollution to pollutants. Right, sure. That's basically what it is, or toxic transfer. You think about it in those terms, and that's really what is going on. You really want to break it down and what's going on, and it's not, there's always a byproduct of that, and, the dioxins that get emitted from it, and there's always a waste thing. It's just, it's made of chemicals, and a combination of chemicals that put out into our environment, or you try to break it down. It's not viable. Like, you can't, it's not when I was saying before that plastic was never made to be recyclable. It's because what I learned was that there's all these different variations of plastic. You might have the 127 resin codes, but there's like over 21,000 different variations of it. If you add a chemical to make it harder, make it softer, put a colorant in it, make a a fragrance, or out of it or whatever, and you've changed that composition. And actually, as you reheat it and do it again, it's going to lose its bonds, its chemical bonds. Not so when you end up having to add virgin plastic to even have any of that rigidity again, and it only gets downcycled once at best, right? It might get made into a park bench or whatever, but you can't continuously recycle plastic because it's just with the same material. And that's part of the problem. But industry just wants it to go away at a fast pace, right? Because they see it. If we do not have a handle on it, no one does. And it is like the physical embodiment of climate change is what you can see.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Well, let me ask you one last question, okay? There are people who are working on plastics made from biological materials, which are supposed to decompose under fairly, ordinary conditions, not high temperature, high pressure. Do you have any, any opinion about that as a substitute, or is that just simply more of the same?
It's kind of more of the same, and the reason why I say that is that it hasn't been really been able to be. What happens is with a lot of these bioplastics and resins, and is that to make it have those properties, to make it more rigid or to have it last, they have to add chemicals to it. Extra chemicals, and that's the problem. It's like a whack-a-mole, and because we do not regulate our chemicals the way we should, it's just hard to keep up on. And with that said, though, there are some great stuff coming out as far as materials. Actually, some of them local. There's cruise foam made out of chitin from shrimp shells. We've got lollywares coming out, and there was actually a big symposium down in Moss Landing with all these people working on kelp. Kelp is really promising. If you can sustainably harvest kelp, it's only that you take the top 3 feet off of it, and it will regenerate. Go to the surface. But the problem is, we do have problems with kelp forests that are declining as well. So you want to be, none of this stuff can really be scaled at the point, though. And then you go back to it, like, do we really need to do all this disposable? So we go back to reusables, right? You want more durable goods,
right? And
what really needs to be, used once and thrown away? So like this kelp material they're making, and I knew about it from Lollyware. They're making straws out of kelp that basically could be edible, that if it were to fall into the ocean or the soil or anywhere, and anyone ate it or it became soil, it would. But they also is promising for film. And you could, but right now, the last I heard is that I think the shelf life was 2 weeks, which to me, that's fine. Again, we go back to regional, right? So I want my food, anything I want wrapped, I want that to turn to, food. And I'll just end with this, too, is like one of the best quotes I've seen lately by a Slow Company on social media was, everything we make comes back to the earth as either food or poison.
Okay.
So think about that, right? What's your poison and what is really needed? So that's where we need to, grow up and really take responsibility about this and make these changes that we need to do.
Okay. Well, listen, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for an interesting and provocative discussion. Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to listen to previous shows, you can find them at ksqd.org/sustainability-now and Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Casts, among other podcast sites. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all the staff and volunteers who make K-Squid your community radio station, and especially Emily Dunham, who was engineer for this show. And so, until next every other Sunday, Sustainability Now.